So Sam Circle is a venture development firm, and it works with US universities and healthcare systems to develop product and services, which is able to create a large-scale social and economic impact in emerging economies like India.
Venture capitalists.
So a conventional venture capitalist normally will, are money managers. They raise capital from institutional investors or from high net worth individual families and invest that money in early stage startup. Sam Circle Venture, on the other hand, develops a venture from a strategic perspective. What it does is it tries to dig deep into a university's R&D and identify product and services which has a requirement in a growing economy or emerging economy like India, and try to develop a commercialization plan of their R&D by bringing the capital partners alongside. So it is not just a money manager, but it manages intellect on one side, manages money on the another side, and bring the third perspective of operating partners who then actually execute these particular initiative on the ground. And that is how it creates a commercial enterprise which is able to can be scaled up on a very large scale basis as one moves forward. That's true, because especially in smart cities kind of initiative, we don't just require capital. What we require is means on how that capital needs to be deployed, not just in the physical infrastructure, because we have to identify how these smart cities can be able to generate employability or entrepreneurial ecosystem. And to do that, there has to be economic model that each of these smart cities need to figure it out. And currently those economic models are not being figured out based on the demographics of these particular smart cities. So ideally, in a smart city scenario, we should kind of have a business models for the city based on its geographical, demographics, natural resources, strengths, and accordingly kind of a industry or whether it's manufacturing, whether it's service space, should be attracted, and a strong correlation between education institutions and industry should be created, so that there's a viable and a very sustainable growth model that these cities can go forward. Currently what's happening is the emphasis is more on technology and building physical infrastructure without the underlying emphasis on what will sustain them in the long run. I think that is where this the model, when we say has to be very collaborative, we need various kind of stakeholders who need to be part of this entire initiative. One doesn't just need planners, one needs people who understand economics, one needs people who can understand business perspective, one needs entrepreneurs who will actually execute it. But I think the critical emphasis should be on the education institution. Education institution in each of these smart cities can become a kind of a central point to coordinate among these various other stakeholders, whether these are businesses, whether these are service providers, whether these are professionals, to create a viable commercialization plans, which I think in the Western countries has been done very successfully, because there has to be nucleus in each of these smart cities, and I think large educational institutions can become that nucleus. And we can have multiple large institutions or universities who are specialized in their own area, but they all need to come together and talk. So I think this collaborative environment is very important, of creating a network of people who continuously talk among themselves. So if we look at currently from a smart city perspective in India, I think there are primarily 4 pillars that we see. One is the government, one is the real estate, the physical infrastructure that is going to be built. One is the technology, because world is getting dependent upon technology, and the fourth is the innovation, the new ways of executing ideas which works in country like India. We can't just copy and paste ideas from the Western countries. So that is where I think, in my opinion, we should be heading towards. So I think we are jumping in India. The basics are still not right. So I think we need to first address the basics before we start actually becoming smart. So like you rightly said, we need to first address healthcare, we need to address education, and we need to address in a fashion which we are able to implement very quickly, because the way India is progressing, considering it has the demographic advantage, we don't have too much of a time also to think and plan. So we need a very simple solution which can be executed very fast. And especially on education side, considering we have a very young population, we need to create a very large number of employability for people. It's very important that industry and institutions work together in creating a kind of a platform where our content is continuously changed, because currently what we are teaching is very outdated to what the industry requirements are, and then that creates a gap. Whereas on one side, industry requires large number of people for their to provide employment, but they don't get the right people. And at the same time, what educational institutions are teaching is not good enough for the industry. So if they start talking in a very early stage, and that is not a transactional in nature, which currently happens, that industry and institutions talk only when there is a placement. They need to start talking on a more strategic level, where industry need to play a role of creating the content or curriculum, because industry is smart. They know what kind of a product or services they will be coming 5 years down the line, and for that what kind of a human capital they require, and they need to embed that knowledge into these institutions to say impart this knowledge. And I think that is where it's important that professional needs to get connected with these institutions in a more institutionalized way, rather than on one-to-one basis, which currently is the norm. A lot of people on individual basis are linked with the institutions, but on the institutional level, on companies level, there is no strategic fit still in India. So I think that is true for any emerging economies. There are a lot of people who wants to take advantage of the policy initiatives, or the government projects that come in. Having said that, it's also true that in country like India, there is very less emphasis that is paid on planning, and more emphasis paid on execution. And that is why most of the times, since we have not planned well, we have not spent good amount of time in understanding the problems and straight away jump into execution, there are a lot of, whether these are cost overruns, whether these are delays, that happens in the project executions. And particularly to the smart cities, that's what's happening, because these are like billions of dollars of projects, and look at the amount of time we are putting on the planning these projects. It's disproportionate. Whereas very large amount of time need to be, should have been put on planning these projects, understanding who is going to implement these projects, leave aside where the money will come from. Let's hope even if the money comes from, but where is the resources, where is the intellectual capital, where is the knowledge pool that is available to execute these projects. And that is where, you will find fly-night operators also in these initiatives. And I won't be surprised after 10 years, we feel a situations where these smart cities are not that smart anymore, because world would have moved much faster than what we were thinking. Absolutely, yeah. There's a lack of capacity, and that is where what I meant was we need our basics first. We need to create a very large pool of this capacity building in this country, in the areas which India currently requires, whether these are transportation, whether this is electrical solutions, whether this is mass housing, whether this is skills and training in education, whether it is healthcare services. And it has to be in such a fashion that it is not a kind of a old technology which can be kind of brought into India. It has to be something very latest, because as a country, I think India wants best products, but at a price which is not that high. And the kind number of people that is there in India as consumers kind of justify that thought process to a large extent. And there are large number of examples of global companies or Indian companies which has been able to take advantage of that fact. No, I think it's again one of those things where not much thought has been put across. Housing is not real estate, so first we need to think of housing in a very different manner. So housing can very well go with what government intention is of manufacturing in India. We need to start looking at housing in a very different fashion. We need to start looking at housing beyond the 10-12 major metropolitan cities that we talk about, because there the actual physical construction is a very minuscule amount of the total cost of the project or the total revenue that project generates, whereas we need to provide dwelling units to very large number of people. And currently, if you look at the supply chain or the manufacturing capability that exists in that country, I don't think we are in a position to even construct 1 million homes a year. And here we are talking about, providing housing to all by 2022. So I think there needs to be entire mindset shift. There need to be new industry categories which need to come into the housing, and we need to start approaching housing from a manufacturing perspective, where we have a supply chain and we have a assembling capability and we have a capacity in terms of professionals, both at the white collar level, at the blue collar level, to be able to implement this as a solution, because the numbers or the opportunity is so large that there can be so many players who can get into this business, which will not only help the economy but which will provide very large number of employability to people also.